Okay, I think we're ready to begin. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Keren. I'm a consultant and a team leader at Argentum Consultants. Before we start, I'll just briefly introduce us to those of you who don't know us. So Argentum is a consultancy firm specializing in attaining non-dilutive funding in the European Union. We work in teams. I myself am a team leader in the consulting department. That means that me and my team work hands-on with our clients on preparing proposals. There are also the business development department and the strategy department who are in charge of preparing long-term submission plans for our clients, creating the connections for collaborative projects, etc. I myself have over 12 years of experience in journalism, writing, editing, translation, research, and of course, grant consulting. My team specializes in proposals from clusters 4 and 5 of Horizon Europe. That means any proposals that have to do with digital, space, industry, mobility, climate, and energy are under our responsibility. And today we're going to talk about the EIC Accelerator. The EIC Accelerator is perhaps the most high-profile, prestigious funding scheme for SMEs in the European Union. And it's definitely something that most of our clients are very eager to try out. So today I'll just give you a taste of the few essentials that I like to tell my clients before we start our journey for attaining the EIC Accelerator grant. We will focus mostly on conceptualization of an EIC project and the less than trivial elements of conceptualizing a project that's specific to the narrative expectations of the EIC Accelerator evaluators. But first, maybe I'll just briefly introduce the EIC Accelerator as a funding opportunity. Who are the classic candidates and what is the path that you will need to get through in order to reach the funding agreement? So first of all, let's discuss the classic EIC Accelerator candidate. It's important to say it relates to this slide, but also to any of the upcoming slides that I'm mainly discussing generalized rules of thumb, but there are exceptions to almost any rule that I will lay out today. So just a heads up. First of all, as you may know, the EIC funding includes 2.5 million euros in non-dilutive grant funding for R&D activities, and up to 15 million euros in equity. The funding mechanisms do vary, and we will touch upon that later on. Now, the classic EIC candidate, and again, there are many exceptions to any of the following rules. First, an SME, a small medium enterprise. The exact definition of an SME according to Horizon Europe is, of course, available online. Second, the company has to be based in an eligible country, eligible to submit. That includes EU member states and affiliated countries. There are also specifications for certain countries in terms of the relevant funding mechanisms that they can apply to. We might mention that again later. Another thing is that the company has to have an innovative technology or idea developed in-house, a market-disrupting innovation that is around TRL 6, TRL, technology readiness level. Again, there are variations to the TRL scale, but generally, according to the TRL scale of Horizon Europe, that means a technology demonstrated in relevant environment, a technology that has been demonstrated in conditions simulating an operational environment. So a company that has a prototype or nearly has a prototype, maybe an MVP that still needs some extra features before it reaches the critical stage of demonstration as part of pilots and regulation and all of those activities that are necessary to achieve before market entry. Lastly, and this relates to the TRL point, the company needs to be about 2 years away from market entry. Again, there are exceptions, but this is the official rule. Now, in terms of the process itself, before we dive into the heart of the proposal, then I'll just describe the process. This is fairly new. They've introduced a new step in an online AI platform about 2 years ago. Step 1, which can be submitted whenever, there's no official deadline, is a short online proposal that covers all of the basic concept areas that we will discuss soon. It also includes a short video presenting your team and the team members' motivation, and a pitch deck providing a more visual aspect to the proposal. About 4 to 6 weeks after that, you'll receive an evaluation from 4 independent evaluators. If 2 out of 4 or more give you a go score, then you will be eligible to submit step 2. Now, step 2 is the full EIC Accelerator application. It's about 10 times or more longer than the step 1 proposal. It's also a bit complex in terms of the AI platform that prompts different questions depending on your inputs. We're, of course, the experts on that. And also, there are a few annexes that the applicant needs to submit, for example, a long-term financial projections table, letters of intent from potential collaborators, etc. A few weeks after that, and you will receive the evaluation of 3 independent evaluators, and if all 3 evaluators give you a go score on all of the evaluation criteria, then you will be invited to an interview, an online interview since COVID, that includes a 10-minute pitch and also 35 minutes of questions with the EIC board. Okay, so we've gathered here today to discuss the conceptualization of an EIC Accelerator project. Also, when I finish my talk, we will have a chance to answer some questions, so feel free to send those in the chat box. Okay. Omer, the head of the consulting department, will also join us to answer some questions. So this basic chart that you see here covers the main areas that you will need to address when applying to the EIC Accelerator program. Now, they may seem familiar and a bit trivial from pitching to investors, etc., but here the focus is very different and not always intuitive. Let's start from discussing the problem. So when defining the problem that your solution is aiming to solve, there are 2 main mistakes I think that companies tend to make at this critical stage. One of them is focusing on a very large, broad impact area, for example, global warming, as the problem that their product intends to solve. Now, while that may be part of the answer, this is not the focus we are looking for. Another common mistake is focusing on the shortcomings of competitors, on the state of the art. This is also part of the problem, but not the focus here. In order to have a very good basis for your proposal, for the narrative that you're trying to build, it's important that the problem is the pain points of your market entry clients. The use case for the market entry clients needs to be the use case that your unique selling point covers completely. Now, let's go on to discussing the market. So in terms of the market, the EIC Accelerator requires that you have a specific market entry use case. And this is, again, something that's not very intuitive for many companies. Many companies have a very general platform that they justifiably say could benefit many, many different types of use cases. Now, in our case, we would like to have a specific market entry use case to focus on, or at least a cascaded strategy for building out your roadmap after you enter the market. This is a bit tricky to select the exact use case that's right for you in terms of planning your market entry. Usually, we like to think about two main factors. One is which client has the pain points that match your unique selling point the best, and also what is your so-called low-hanging fruit market segment that has um, great regulatory conditions and that you have already some clients active in that market, some connections that you can already discuss to ensure a smooth market entry with few barriers before you expand to other use cases, territories, and market segments. Now, the last component of this triangle is the solution. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the solution should be around TRL 6. Again, this is flexible. Some companies have a longer path to the market. Some have a product that's more well-developed, but TRL 6 is the classic. Now, the solution should be one solution to one problem, aiming at one market. Again, it's okay if you have many scale-up opportunities and a broader vision, but we need to have a focus. It can be one product or service, or framing a few products and services as one suite of products that together address the problem that you wish to solve. Another important thing is that this unique selling point relies on IP that you have in-house and activities that you can perform in-house. Now that we've set the basic elements of the concept, it's time to discuss the work plan, which is an organized view of what you are actually going to do in the project and what you request funding for. Now, the work plan includes two distinct stages. The first one is the R&D stage. That is 2 years, bringing you from TRL 6 to TRL 8, meaning bringing you to your market entry point. This stage is covered mostly by the grant component. We'll discuss the differences between the funding mechanisms in the next slide. It also includes, in addition to R&D activities, a few management activities, a few preliminary commercial activities, but no actual marketing at this stage. Now, the second stage of the work plan is the market deployment stage. And here they're more flexible. It's up to you whether this takes 1, 2, 3, 4 years. You define this for yourself. But these are basically the activities needed for bringing you from the point of entering the market with a few innovator clients to the point where you are fully deployed and have reached mass market clients. Again, this is different for different types of companies and is flexible. As I mentioned, the key innovation activities must be performed by the companies. Like many funding schemes, the EIC frowns upon extensive subcontracting, so it's important that at least most of the core innovation activities are performed in-house. You will need to provide deliverables that are tangible items that you submit to the funding body after the proposal is approved to show your progress. And also you will set milestones, key moments in the lifetime of the project to measure your own progress. In terms of implementation, it's also important to remember that the EIC Accelerator looks for high risk, high potential projects. That means that if you're still at a risky stage, as is common for companies at TRL 6 who have the truly market disrupting innovation, that's perfectly okay, and this is what the EIC is looking for. It is, however, important to avoid any risks that are not completely in your control. For example, if the regulatory landscape is not ready yet for your innovation, or if your supply chain is very unstable in a way that you cannot mitigate and don't have proper risk coverage. So those are things that we should consider before attempting to submit to the EIC Accelerator. Now, the last part, before we reach that, let's discuss a bit the funding strategy. First, There's the grant component. We've mentioned that earlier. It's fairly straightforward. Your company can receive up to 70% funding and no more than 2.5 million euros for innovation activities only. And those activities, as we've mentioned earlier, take place during the first 2 years of the project up until your market entry. That means that if you want to receive the maximum funding for the best funding rate, your budget would need to be around 3.57 million euros for R&D activities alone. You can also ask for a higher amount, but then you would need to provide more supplementary funding. As for the equity component, first of all, it's important to remember that there's an option of submitting for the grant only and not requesting any equity. If your company wishes to avoid further diluting its resources, it's an option. However, it's important to remember that it's a tricky one because you would need to explain how you can manage to cover not only the R&D activities, but also the market deployment activities independently, while still making sure that your need for funding is clear. The EIC Accelerator only funds projects that would otherwise not be able to reach the market in the same manner without the EIC Accelerator support. So that could suit companies perhaps that have investors who are willing to invest in the commercialization phase only once the EIC Accelerator grant is received and de-risks the project. That's a certain scenario, but it's tricky. Now, in terms of the equity component, this was again introduced a few years back. You can receive anywhere between 0.5 to 15 million euros. The most common way to receive the equity component is through the blended finance option. This option is for companies who are already ready to start negotiations with investors. Perhaps they even have a funding round not too far in the future. And that means that the minute this company signs a grant agreement, it can already start negotiating with investors introduced by the EIC, or negotiating for loans from the EIC. And that way, the company can fund not only its commercial activities, but also some of the activities planned for the R&D phase, meaning the 30% remaining funding for the budget and other activities. For some companies who are not yet ready to initiate discussions with investors, there's also the grant first option. That means that the company chooses to first develop its product without the equity component until it reaches a certain de-risking milestone. For example, a medtech company that still perceives itself as too risky to start negotiations with investors until it starts clinical trials, for example. This is a great option for companies who have a bumpier road to the market, but it's not for everyone. There's also the equity-only option, but this is for the rare cases that we mentioned earlier and said we will not discuss here at length. And now we reach the go-to-market stage. Go-to-market questions comprise more than a half of the full EIC Accelerator proposal, and that means that companies who have a well-built business strategy when submitting to the EIC Accelerator will have a much easier time to manage. It's also important to remember in this context that once you pass step 1, you're eligible for 3 days of coaching with an EIC coach, business coaching that can help companies who don't have a well-built business strategy to prepare for this part of the proposal. So some of the main things that are covered by the go-to-market sections of the proposal are, of course, knowing your market, as we mentioned earlier, knowing your competitors, both in terms of technological state of the art, but also other technologies who compete with you on the same space, on the same clients, know your market entry strategy, know your business model, your pricing strategy, unit economics, and of course, your regulatory roadmap, your IP strategy, and your planned scale up and ability to scale up. You'll also have a chance here to discuss the broader impact, things that we try to avoid when discussing the focused problem, but are of course an important consideration for the overall proposal. So to sum up, before we move on to the questions, again, these are all issues that you're well familiar with from discussions with investors, but the EIC Accelerator puts special emphasis on the specific product, specific project, and the success of an initial market entry before it focuses on the broader vision, on the broader impact. And this is something that's not very intuitive, and of course, where we come in. So thank you for listening. And I'd also like to welcome Omer, who is the head of the consulting department, to join me and answer a few questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, for some reason, I cannot share my video, but I did list your questions as the webinar went on. So I'm going to go through all the questions, actually, and hope that I can help you. And if you didn't get the answer, you are welcome to still write, and we'll do our best to answer. You're welcome to also ask follow-up questions. So first of all, thank you very much, Keren. And I'm going to move on to the questions. So a lot of questions were around UK-based entities or Swiss entities. So unfortunately, the UK and Swiss-based companies cannot apply for the EIC, but we do have clients from the UK and from Switzerland who are submitting similar grants. The UK and the Swiss know the situation, and they're trying very hard to present alternative funding sources for the national companies, including Swiss Accelerator, Smart Grants, Innovate UK, and all this kind of alternatives. So we also work with Swiss and UK companies, and we have alternatives for the EIC specifically. There's also a question, can a UK-based company apply for this, a standalone entity without forming a consortium? So the EIC, as I say, UK-based company cannot apply for the EIC, and the EIC is a single entity proposal in any case. It's not a consortium. Another question was around the time to market. So we said about 2 to 3 years to market is the classic timing, let's say, but Keren also stated that there are exceptions. So the question exactly was since when, like from today or since the grant provided? So essentially, the answer is since the grant is provided. EIC application, if we consider first stage, second stage, and the interview could last around 10 months, let's say, which another 2 months for the signing the grant agreement. So we plan the project ahead, considering that, and we manage the timeline and the activities to start when the grant agreement is signed. And the grant in general is for 24 months of activities. Okay, the grant money covers 24 months, and it's expected to have some kind of reasonable time to market when finishing this grant activities. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, okay, we are market ready, we are now going into the market. Of course, it's not one size fits all. So it depends on your thematic area, of course, and the EIC understand that. But we have to show that we are really de-risking the project into a level that it's reasonable that we get into market in the foreseeing time, and say exactly how we're going to do that. So we had companies with, let's say, 60-month time to market. and there are companies with 24 and there are companies with less. So it's manageable, but the classic is 2 to 3 years from the start of the project. Another question was regarding if we can explain more a little bit about TRL 6. So we said TRL 5 and 6 are our eligibility criteria. And it means that it's a very tricky term, TRL level, because you have to be somewhat mature enough to show initial results, okay, that your technology indeed works. The definition of a TRL 6 is technology demonstrated in relevant environment, meaning that you have initial results to build on, you have the technological feasibility, you have to convince that after we've finished with the development, the technology would work. You have some kind of indications for that. And the idea of the EIC to take a proven technology in that sense to market. So TRL 6 or TRL 5 and 6 basically means that we have some kind of developments to do before we go into TRL 7, which is demonstration in operational environment, which mean piloting activities, clinical trials, and so on. So it really depends on your thematic area. Another thing that we need to consider is that there are companies with products on the market, okay? Products that are commercialized and they're in the market, but you wanna take them down a little bit in terms of the TRL, okay? And add additional features or add additional developments to that product. Also, sometimes we call it, let's say that we have an MVP in the market, let's say a minimum viable product, but we want to add on to that 24 months of developments, okay, and release another product to market, a more advanced one with all kind of, with the advanced technologies that we want to include. So in that sense, you can also be in TRL 6, although you have already a product in the market. So it really depends, and I hope I answered that question and that it's all clear. Last question was about the odds of an Israel company to get the grant. So it's same as all companies. Israel is no exception. So I think this information can be, we can well introduce. There are, of course, the general odds to win an EIC. There are our success rates, which are higher. And if you want additional information, you will get an email after this webinar in which you can reach out to our marketing department and they'll give you all the data. I think that covers it. If you have more questions, this is the time to ask. Okay, so.
I see a lot of love for my dog, so thank you.
Yes, they really loved your dog.
Yes, it was unexpected, thank you. And also in terms of how much time to dedicate to preparing a step 2 proposal, I see that was one of the questions. This varies depending on your readiness, especially in terms of the business strategy, as we've discussed, because you might want to use up the extra time you have to reach out to consultants, to the EIC coach, also in addition. But in general, for our clients, we recommend a period of about 3 months for writing step 2. That allows to maintain consistency and make sure that all of the important areas are covered. Because again, once you put all of the pieces into place inside this narrative structure that we've presented, you may discover some weak spots or things that you still need to rethink before submitting. So it's important to have enough time for that.
Yes, and now I see all kind of questions that that I want to go through. So there was a question about the equity part. Does it require to have some equity from private investors? So for the equity part, the EIC, basically what it wants to see is that you will bring in a strategic investor who will match their funds If you don't have such an investor, they have pool of investors that you can engage with. Private investors are also welcome of course, to invest in your financing round. But if none of that comes through, meaning you don't have a private investor or a strategic investor, or the engagement didn't come to fruition, let's say, from their pool of investors, the EIC would be willing to invest the entire amount on their own, in their, of course, in their own terms. So the equity, once it's approved, it's guaranteed if you would like to have it. But the idea is that you bring on a strategic investor who will be willing to invest alongside the EIC. And this is also a great focus in the step 2 applications, your financing strategy, basically. And they want to see, of course, investors who are willing to invest and they are involved and they can take this product into the market. So another question, I hope, yes, this is another equity questions. I think I also answered that. How much will cost suggestion services for SME if we apply to for EIC? That you can approach, of course, our marketing department. They'll be happy to discuss it and give you an offer. Let's see, does the company has to be pre-market to apply? I said you can have a product in the market, but the project needs to, of course, be a new project with new innovation and developments. There is an opportunity to ask for equity only, okay, in some cases, but this is an exception and it has to be dealt separately. So in that sense, this is something that's worth looking into, even if you have a product on the market. Okay. So this is from anonymous attendee. It's a very specific question. Please reach out to our marketing development regarding the timing of your proposal. If we suggest to submit in the next opening in June, or submit in October. What else?
I think most of the questions here relate to our service and the services that we provide. So that will be answered separately later. And again, we'll send you an email so you can also contact us and our marketing team.
Yes, same goes for other funding opportunities for companies in a lower TRL. I would just say that in terms of, in general, Argentum is dealing with a lot of funding mechanisms around Europe. We are targeting many funding directions in all level of TRLs. So you're welcome to reach out for that as well. Keren, do you see another thing?
No, just continuing what you said, our service also includes long-term build out of a funding strategy and a submission strategy, including creating connections for collaborative projects all over Europe, including national funding of sorts. So there are hundreds of funding opportunities that we specialize in. So this is all something that you can discuss later if you want, but maybe it answers some questions here.
Okay.
And thank you again so much for listening.
Yes, thank you very much.
Goodbye.